Tell me, Libby, you are a proponent of national housing strategy. Tell me what would be in it for people living with HIV. What has it got? What would you like to see in it?
Well, the housing bill that I have that will be reintroduced is based on the premise that housing is a human right. So it calls on the federal government to develop a strategy with provinces, territories, municipalities, stakeholders to ensure that there is appropriate, safe, secure, and affordable housing for all kinds of different populations. And so obviously, like for example. NAHA, the National Aboriginal Housing Association, has endorsed the bill. Many other groups have endorsed the bill, the Wellesley Institute. And so as that bill, if it came to reality, and I believe it will, then it would compel the federal government to develop a strategy that would, for example, include people with HIV/AIDS and would be able to specify a specific plan around the needs of people with HIV/AIDS. We don't have such a plan now. It doesn't exist federally. There is some funding available from time to time on various specific projects, but there's no overall plan, and that's why we need to have this bill go forward.
Now, you've been a frequent speaker on HIV/AIDS in the House of Commons. Tell me, what's the political climate? Are people in government prepared to listen to HIV issues, or is it something that's going off the agenda and we really need to work at?
Well, the Canadian AIDS strategy, I mean, there is one. Unfortunately, I feel that the Conservative government has been very lukewarm to actually being proactive on this strategy. We know, for example, when we had the International AIDS Conference in Canada, in Toronto, a few years ago, the minister even refused to show up. So they don't seem to have an awful lot of interest. I mean, there is a program, there are funds available, but groups are always struggling to keep their programs going under the overall strategy. And I think when it comes to certain aspects of HIV/AIDS, for example, issues around harm reduction of drug users, the Conservative government actually dropped that in their so-called four-pillar approach on a drug strategy. They dropped the pillar dealing with harm reduction in 2007, and that's been a huge problem, a setback. But what I do want to say, to be very positive, because that's the name of your website. That's right, Positive Light, is that despite that, there's still a huge movement in Canada around harm reduction, around locally based solutions, and we've seen that very much at the conference here today. Yes. And so I think that's very strong. So despite a Conservative government, things are still moving. But we do need to have federal leadership, and that's one of the calls that I made today, that we need more elected people to speak out.
Yes, and that message came loud and clear. One final question, Libby. You clearly have a passion for HIV. You've spoken many times. This is one of your causes that you've really pushed. Where does that passion come from?
It comes from my own community. It comes from people I represent. In my riding of Vancouver East, there are people who are really going up against the system. There are people who are living in pain. There are people who are having a really hard time. I believe it's my responsibility and duty as a member of Parliament to fight for the rights of those people. And in fact, when I see some of those folks take on the system, and I see how incredibly strong they are, it actually makes me more determined to take on the fight in Ottawa. I want there to be more people speaking out federally, but I've never felt like it was, let me put it the positive way. I've always felt it was totally the right thing to do, and that these issues are very compelling. These are people who are often marginalized and silenced in our society. There's a great stigma, and so dealing with these issues of poverty, of harm reduction, of people who are facing the reality of maybe living below the poverty line with HIV/AIDS and inappropriate housing and just struggling day by day. I mean, these are very compelling issues, and we've got to keep bringing them forward.
Libby, you are a real inspiration and a true ally of our community, and I want to thank you for talking to Positive Light and the OHTN, and thank you for coming to New Orleans and really caring. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you here in a great city, eh?
It is a wonderful city. Thank you, Libby.
Okay.